My name is Patrick Huff, retired principal, adjunct professor. It's good to be with you again, Senator Taylor and members of the Senate Education Committee. If you are looking for elements of the TEC to give mandate relief from and to solve some of your funding problems, look no further than Chapter 39. The entire accountability system is built on deception and manipulation around the term of school failure. Our ideas about school failure developed and were solidified during the No Child Left Behind era. Standards, which were the AYP percentages, went up each year. By 2011, most schools in Texas and across America were struggling to meet accountability, and superintendents were in a panic. Why were the percentages going up? Because the No Child Left Behind mandate mandated that by 2014, schools would have 100% percentages of testing outcomes as passing. Now, schools are not failing in their efforts, their teaching, or their leadership. It was the system that caused the schools to fail. Now, what I would like for us to do is just admit that with rising AYP the way it did, that is what caused schools to fail. The AYP progression chart is in your handout. This led to the waiver era that we are still in. I'm sure you are all familiar with the waiver. The critical conditions of getting the waiver were to adopt Common Core and link the teacher evaluation to the student testing outcomes. This resulted in teachers teaching to the test. So in Commissioner Williams' letter of application, he outlined how the Texas Tx were significantly aligned to Common Core. You have that handout also in your hands. Now, this also set up, the waiver did, the system whereby 5% of our schools must fail every year. These are the IR campuses. The way the waiver is written, there must be a bottom 5% of schools designated and identified each year. As we can see, the system is being manipulated. It's why the TEA can brag that they have approximately 95% of schools make accountability standards every year. Senators, can we admit that we do have Common Core in Texas and that the idea of school failure is a myth that is built around misleading terminology, deceptive data, and outright manipulation of the facts? So I call for you to eliminate Chapter 39, solve your funding problems, and set free the teachers of Texas. Thank you. I invite your questions.
Dr. Huff, I'm sorry, I've got a lot of information to go through real quick, but I appreciate you sharing that and giving it to us in writing. So
sure.
A lot of this obviously happened in years past, and we're making our best efforts to perform where we can. That's why we're having this discussion today on how to go forward. The School Finance Commission has been spending a lot of time since January working on this very issues, not just finances, outcomes is a big part of what we're working on and trying to make sure we improve our students' outcome. A lot of that's allocating how the resources we have and those type of things. So I appreciate your input on this. So you're a professor, a retired professor?
No, I am currently an adjunct professor,
okay.
Retired principal.
Okay.
May I add just one point?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You know, we have two sets of laws running parallel to each other, and we tend to ignore one but pay attention to the other because the other one has the hammer attached to it. They can fail a school and bring on sanctions. So we have Chapter 11 that provides for the well-being of students. Lots of programs involved in Chapter 11 that are great. And then we have Chapter 39 that deals with accountability, Chapter 39A that deals with sanctions going along with accountability. Well, no one's going to pay attention to 11 when they have 39 to deal with. So a lot of times your campus improvement plans, which used to be very comprehensive in the past, dealing with all the issues that a campus has to deal with, now they only focus on outcomes and how to improve outcomes. And so a lot of things are being lost because we focus on that area of the code that delivers the hammer. We need to get back, and the only way to solve the problem is to eliminate it. Because as long as you have the hammer, that's what people are going to pay attention to.
Well, I mean, the accountability, are you saying just take out all accountability?
Sure, take it out.
You remember the Perot Commission?
I do. I know. I've been through it all. I began teaching in 1973.
Because I mean, I graduated right before that, and I was shocked to find out within a few years that kids had actually gone through 12 years of public education that weren't being able to read.
Right. But the way that our TEEPs are arranged now through Common Core and with the way they move, so many kids are left behind because the system moves forward. There is no time for remediation.
Well, that's one of the things we're trying to work on is self-paced. You know, we can actually individualize our teaching based on the student's ability to grasp the subject at hand. If they need more time, we should give them more time. And if they're ready to move on to the next, we should let them move on and go to higher level.
If teachers can teach without the hammer, you could keep parts of the accountability. You could work on that, but the hammer has got to go. And I know you're thinking, well, then how can we keep them in line? How can we make sure that the data is giving us what we need to get? But as long as you have the hammer, the teachers are going to teach to the test.
Well, a lot of times it's not the teachers. A lot of times it's the district. I mean, we have long-time failing campuses within districts. And without some kind of, we've actually reduced the number of failing campuses by more than any other year in the past year because of some things we've done.
I would maintain to you, Senator Taylor, that you're using the wrong data to come to that conclusion.
Okay, well, we only have certain data. Do you have a recommendation on what data we should be using?
Well, first of all, you've got to remove the entire hammer that exists with 39 and 39A, and then go back and begin supplementing where you need to make sure that schools are, you know, there are leadership problems, granted. There are
and that's what I'm saying.
problems.
We've got 1,000 districts. We've got 8,000 campuses. There's some that just aren't doing the job. So what do you do with those?
And so I think for the vast majority of those, Senator Taylor, you can turn it back to the area superintendent, the superintendent over that district.
They already
and the
have
school
those
boards.
campuses.
Right.
They already have them, and they're not being done. They're not working. They're dysfunctional. So what do you do with those campuses?
Where they are dysfunctional in terms of how you define it. They're not you. I'm not being.
I didn't make these rules. I'm just trying.
I know. I'm not being accusatory.
And I'm not trying to defend the current system.
Yeah.
But we got to have some way to make sure that every student is getting the education.
But I think if you talk to parents across the state, they would tell you they hate it. They hate the testing accountability system, and schools hate it. They hate it, and it's a prison for them to live in.
Well, that's fairly strong. I understand your opinion, but
yeah,
I just feel like we have a very large state, 5.4 million students, and our goal is to make sure that every one of those students gets the educational opportunity to really help them reach their goals.
right.
And some of that requires some things that people may or may not like, but you've got to have some kind of standard that, you know, after 12 years of public education with how much we're spending per student, that's a very large investment per child.
The reformers have been in this program for 35 years, and we still have a crisis.
Yeah.
Where's the problem?
Well, our world has changed, and we have some new challenges. And that's part of why we're doing the School Finance Commission, is to address our changing demographics and where our needs are and look at how we're doing it. So I'm not for throwing all of it out. We have revised it significantly in the time that I've been in the Senate.
When you have conversations about it, I'd be glad to be a part of it if you want to contact me.
All right, well, thank you.
Yeah, I would love to contribute.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question if I may.
Senator Sullivan.
Dr. Huff, what do you consider the criteria for a well-performing district or a poorly performing district? Dr. Huff,
Yeah.
absent Chapter 39, if somebody said, you set down the criteria for an adequately or an exceptionally performing district or a failing one, what criteria would you use?
Well, Senator, it's good to be with you again. You asked me a similar question the last time we met.
I forgot the answer.
Sure. The way our system is set up, the community is the #1 judge for how a school is operating. The community. They elect their school board members, and they trust their school board members to carry out their role and responsibility. If they don't like it, they vote them out. They put somebody else in. And this is our whole property tax base is built on this. The fact that we have the ability to enter into the representative government procedure that we have, and I would hate to see that go away. So the community is the number one judge. And they are going to be able to tell you how well a school is doing, okay? The teachers are also one of the greatest judges of how well each individual student is learning. And when a teacher is forced to teach to a test, there is no way, there's absolutely no way to really tell from the data how well a student is doing.
So you don't think there are any empirical measures of success or failure? Because let me point something out.
Sure.
We've got a lot of districts that have IR campuses where they keep re-electing the same board members.
Mm-hmm.
So that process really doesn't winnow them out the way that you idealistically say that it does. So do you have, and you would be the one to ask, what empirical criteria would you use to say that a district is performing well or not?
Well, so with empirical, you're saying, where's the data? Show me the proof.
What would you say if you had two school districts and you were saying one is better than the other? What criteria would you
Well,
use?
there's too many variables in there to where you can compare one district with another. Who are you going to compare? Are you going to compare HISD with the Woodlands?
I don't care which two you that's just as an example. I don't
Okay,
care
I
which two you
understand.
compare,
But
but
you-
how do you determine one district is doing well or another district is not?
Right. You can always fall back on percentages of those students that are going on to college, SAT information, ACT information. That's always been done in the past. You can look at different measures that have been taken by the school, IQ percentages. You know, we don't do IQ tests anymore, to my knowledge, but it was a pretty good factor of how a school was going to do. There are too many variables. When you began to say, okay, we've got this particular school and district that is performing very well according to STAR, and this one that is not, where are the variables? I mean, it's apples and oranges. Senator West, DISD in Highland Park, can we compare those two?
Thank you for joining me in this conversation.
I'm sorry, Senator Zeller, that's what, I know you're from the Panhandle area.
So let me ask you a question, man.
Please.
I think that local school districts obviously have a place in the system, but statewide, we have to have standards also that we hold our school districts to.
Sure.
When we provide them the resources to educate our children.
Right.
And so I think that it's within the purview of our fiduciary duty as legislators pursuant to the Constitution of the state of Texas that we set a standard, that we provide the resources and hold school districts accountable for achieving those standards without putting handcuffs on how they go about doing it.
Okay, and we have been in that mode of operation since the mid-90s.
I agree with you.
And where are we?
But, and you made a statement a few months ago.
Please.
You made a statement a few minutes ago that I agree with you wholeheartedly. For 35 years, we've been doing the same old, and still coming up with the same old results. I think that I could ask TA to do a longitudinal analysis, and frankly, some of the same schools that were in need of improvement, or whatever we said 35 years ago, are still in need of improvement, even though we're putting billions and billions of dollars in there. That's the very reason I asked TA. And when you get down to it, for us, you look at African American males and Hispanic males, and they're always down at the bottom of the performance ladder. Even though we may compare them with other similar groups throughout the United States and say we're doing better in the state of Texas, we're still doing bad, okay? And so I've asked TEA, the Texas Education Agency, the Texas Workforce Commission, Higher Education, to come up with a plan and to determine exactly what they would recommend to this legislative body charged with having a fiduciary duty to provide a quality education to students in the state of Texas, what we should do. Because if we can get those demographics up, then we can get everyone up. So, but I still believe that we need to be able to measure it from the state level, because if we don't, then we don't, and it has to be apples to apples as opposed to apples to oranges. Because if we don't have that, then we have no ability to know whether those students across the state are getting what we believe is a quality education.
And I think you would possibly, I'm sorry, Senator Zelda, are we good? I know I didn't answer your question completely.
Well, I just keep going.
Okay.
Well, I find out the other things I don't agree with.
Thank you. It's good to have the debate.
Yeah.
Always. Senator West, when we have a situation, like you say, apples to apples, we have to take into consideration, and I know we're always talking about the low socioeconomic kids, and yes, the African American males and the Hispanic males. But when you look at the variables that are involved with those population areas, you cannot compare the wealthy school districts with those of the Title I, those located in poverty.
Let me respond to you on
Sure.
that issues. I agree, but if we know that those students in the wealthier school districts are achieving at a certain level, then and they're meeting quote unquote our standards across the state, then we need to make certain that those students in those Title I districts are able to have the resources, figure out exactly what variables are involved, and try to fix those variables to make certain that they can achieve at the same level or beyond that level.
Right. And when I mentioned the campus
And variables, you can quantify variables, quantify and qualify.
Yeah.
Qualitative and quantitative analysis on those variables, so you can kind of control for them, because we have all of this history over the past 100 years in terms of what variables are good predictors, if you will, that correlate with success. And if we know what those variables are from an empirical analysis, then we should be able to work with those variables.
Right.
I find that to the extent that each student is getting the same amount of money to a certain extent, basic allotment, it's at the local school district level to make certain that those resources are put into the areas that need to be worked on, okay? And to the extent that local school boards don't appropriate appropriately to those programs and those schools that need it, then that's a big problem. One of the things that we're doing on the Public School Finance Commission that we're recommending is that when we start talking about students at risk, that there should be a spectrum. And that spectrum should be based on zip codes. And so to the extent that you have a high degree of poverty, and we know poverty positively correlates with success or lack thereof, you put those resources there. And that's what school districts should be doing. So if you have a feeder pattern in a specific zip code, you need to make certain those resources are going there as opposed to being spread throughout the entire district.
Right.
So there needs to be a spectrum. That's one of the recommendations that we're making.
Yeah. One of the key areas of making a difference on any campus is the leadership that's coming out of the principal. I think everybody would agree with that.
Assuming they have the resources to make a difference.
True. But a good leader, a sacrificial leader that gives him or herself to the teachers and is available to the teachers and brings in the resources, like you say, can make a tremendous difference.
And we're having this conversation, and I think it's a great conversation, but here's the deal. We can have a sacrificial leader, and this I am. If I'm in a gunfight and I need 6 bullets and I only have 1, what's the odds of me winning? Okay? So you have a sacrificial leader that only has, he needs 6 bullets, and he only has 1 in terms of resources.
Right.
What's the odds of him winning?
Absolutely.
And still being an effective leader on a campus that doesn't have the resources in order to teach kids, taking in consideration the variables that you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. And so I think, just to wrap it up, because I know you have to move on.
Senator Sullivan, you had a question.
Yeah, a statement that you just made about teachers. I think we're getting into a period of time where we're going to look at models like the one used at Dallas ISD, where teachers, based upon various criteria, are going to be paid more money. Well, if you don't think outcomes should be any of those criteria, what would we use? Because clearly we need to pay to keep our best teachers in the classroom. But if we're not going to use outcome, what criteria do we suggest that they use?
That's a very difficult question, Senator.
That's why I asked you.
Yeah. If you have it based on outcomes, they're going to make sure that their outcomes are better. They're going to do their dead level best. But that merit pay has always been a problem. Merit pay has a very difficult time working in the school system. We tried it back in the 80s, career ladder, remember that?
Right?
Funding was a problem, okay? That's basically why it fell apart. But it's very difficult in a school setting to work merit pay because you're not dealing with a fixed product.
Right.
You're dealing with a child that has tremendous variables that go along with how well they're going to learn, how well they're going to behave, and whether or not the teacher is going to be able to work with them where they are and bring their outcomes up. A child is not a product to be molded and shaped and then spit out at the end of the assembly line. Just tremendous variables involved. And this is why you cannot compare districts because there's too much at stake, too much involved.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Betancourt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to say that I agree, Mr. Chairman, with you as well as Senator Seliger and Senator West, that what gets measured gets fixed.